Hello, boys and girls. It's great to see you again. I can't wait to read you another story. And welcome to Story Time with Ms. Garner. I have another book by Patricia Polacco. Now, I know the last book I read to you, The Junkyard Wonders, was also written by her. I have a few more facts that I'd like to share with you about this wonderful American author and illustrator. Did you know, boys and girls, that she has written and illustrated more than 90 books? Wow, that's a lot. She was born in the year 1944. So if you do the math, 2020 minus 1944. Come on, all you mathematicians, I know you can figure it out. That's right. She's 76 years old. She was born on July 11th in 1944 in Lansing, Michigan, and lived on a farm until 1949. She would take turns living with her mother and in Oakland, California, and then in the summertime with her father, who lived in Union City, Michigan. And she eventually settled there, and that's where she is today, boys and girls, Union City, Michigan. So if you ever take a family trip there, maybe you could visit her or at least see where her house is. Her mother's family were Jewish immigrants from Russia and the Ukraine, and on her father's side, the family came from the county of Limerick in Ireland. So I know the third graders in my class are learning all about immigrants. And think about where your family's from. Are any of them from Russia or the Ukraine or Ireland? Are any from Limerick, Ireland, the county of Limerick? Both cultures kept their family history alive by storytelling. That's why she's such a great storyteller. As you know, as I shared with you last time, she really struggled with reading. And it wasn't until a teacher discovered that she had dyslexia that she was able to, with a lot of help, overcome it, and then was a great reader and writer. So when she was struggling with reading, though, she never strayed from her passion, which was art. She loved art and said that, for me, this is her talking, for me, art is like breathing. She loved to express herself, drawing and painting and even sculpting. Her first book was Meteor, and it was about a meteor that actually fell onto the property where she lived. And she uses in her books, I researched the art medium because I was so curious as to what type of material she used, and she uses Pentel markers. Do any of you have Pentel markers? Then you have something that Patricia Polacco uses in her illustrations. She uses acrylic paint and also colored pencils. I bet some of you have colored pencils. Well, you're using the same art materials that Patricia Polacco does. Did you know she had favorite books? Think of some of your favorite books. I wonder if you have some of the same favorite books as she does. Some of her favorite books are Peter Rabbit. When she was growing up, it was Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. Do you remember that story? When Peter Rabbit went into Mr. McGregor's garden? Oh my. Mother Goose, Grimm's Fairy Tales. Oh, we have something in common. I love Grimm's Fairy Tales. And a book by Dr. Seuss. Do you recognize the title? Horton Hatches the Egg? That was one of her favorite books. Let's see, in most of her books, there's a kind of a pattern, boys and girls. If you read her books, you'll notice that many times, most of the time, in fact, there is an elderly character in her book and a young character. So I wonder if that will happen in today's book. Let's see. The Junkyard Wonders that we just read. Who was the elderly character? That's right, the teacher. And the younger character or characters were her students. That's correct. So for those interested in writing books, are any of you interested in becoming an author, illustrator? I can see a few hands. Well, she said the importance of taking the time, stresses the importance of taking the time to use and listen to your imagination. That's what she stresses, the importance of taking the time to use and listen to your imagination and not get distracted by outside interruptions. Like, what do you think I'm about to say? What could be an outside distraction? Like television. That's right. In fact, she attributes her vivid imagination to all the storytelling in her family and the absence of TV. So she didn't grow up with a television set. That's why she was able to rely on her imagination, boys and girls, and become such an accomplished writer and illustrator. So if she didn't have a TV, she didn't have video games either. Or, oh gosh, I don't know, whatever else, any type of electronics that took her away from her art. So boys and girls, I am about to read you a book that she wrote. And remember we talked about last time how many of her books were inspired by where she lived and by her family members. Well, Patricia Polacco had a brother, an older brother, just she and her brother. And that's what this story is inspired by, her older brother. Except I think you might laugh at the title. My Rotten Redheaded Older Brother. Oh my, boys and girls. What do you suppose makes her brother so rotten? How many of you have brothers and sisters at home? How many of you have a brother? Would you call him rotten? Oh, okay, some of you would. Well, how many of you have a sister at home? Or maybe a brother and a sister. How many of you are an only child? Well, if you're an only child, you won't have to deal with a rotten redheaded brother or sister. That could be a good thing. I grew up with 2 brothers and a sister. And, well, let's see, was my brother rotten? Brothers? Well, one liked to tease a lot, I'd say. But he probably would think I was pretty rotten. I was the bossy older sister. So, anyway, during this time of quarantine, boys and girls, we're with our siblings a lot more than usual. So they might be feeling a little rotten from time to time. But deep down, boys and girls, wouldn't you agree that your brothers and sisters really do love you a lot? And so even though we might get on each other's nerves as brothers and sisters, deep down we know that they are truly our very best friends, and they'll always be there for us. And hopefully we'll always be there for them. Well, I hope you enjoy this story, boys and girls, about My Rotten Redheaded Older Brother by Patricia Polacco. And let's look at the illustration. Can you tell that she uses Pentel marker, colored pencil, and acrylic paint? I think I see that. So, what's really wonderful about this book, boys and girls, is that she has actual family photos in the beginning of she and her brother and her mother. And I hope that perhaps when you go to the library, when the libraries open up again, that perhaps you can check out this book, or maybe Mom and Dad will order it for you so that you can see and look at the family photos more closely. My Rotten Redheaded Older Brother. Why do you suppose she thinks he's rotten? What do you suppose he does that makes her think of him in that way? Let's find out. There's lots of pictures. Oh, now isn't that nice? She dedicates this book to my brother Rich with love. That's so nice. So even though he might have been a little rotten when they were growing up, she dedicated this book to him. Who do you suppose that is in the picture? Now, if you know anything about Patricia Polacco, we know that she had Russian immigrant grandparents. So that's her grandmother, who she would call Babushka. And there she is in the kitchen. That's Patricia when she was a young girl, and her brother with the red hair. Let's begin. Let's see if I can turn it this way. Can you see okay? All right. My brother and our mother and I all lived with my grandparents on their farm in Union City, Michigan. Now, my babushka, my grandmother, knew lots of things. She knew just how to tell a good story. She knew how to make ordinary things magical. And she knew how to make the best chocolate cake in Michigan. After she told my brother and me a grand tale from her homeland, we'd always ask, "Bubby, is that true?" She'd answer, "Of course it's true, but it may not have happened." Then she'd laugh. It's true, but it may not have happened. Next picture. Now, I knew that she loved me all right, but I couldn't quite understand how she could even like my older brother, Richard. He had orange hair that was like wire. He was covered in freckles and looked like a weasel with glasses. The one thing that my bubby didn't seem to know was how perfectly awful my brother really was. Mind you, he was always nice whenever she was around us. But as soon as she'd leave, he would do something terrible to me and laugh. Does that sound like a brother or sister you have at home? There were so many things that I couldn't stand about him. The worst was that he was always telling me he could do just about everything better than I. "Bet I can pick more blackberries than you can," he jeered at me one day. "No, you can't." "Can so." "Cannot." "Can," he whispered. "Not," I said louder. "Can," he whispered so low that I could hardly hear him. "Not," I screamed back. We both picked berries for most of the afternoon. Well, he upped and did it. He not only picked more berries than I, he set a record that wasn't even challenged for the next 10 years. "You make me sick, Richard Barber," I yelled at him. Then he smiled that smile that only a rotten, red-headed older brother could smile. I guess I would have to face it. He could run the fastest, climb the highest, throw the farthest, sit the longest, get the dirtiest, burp the loudest, and spit the farthest. He had no equal, certainly not me. "And I'm 4 years older than you. Always have been and always will be," he sneered. There had to be something I could do that he couldn't. Then an inspired thought comforted me, like a fresh breeze on a hot summer day. "Oh, Richie," I cooed as I stood next to the rhubarb bushes. Do you know what rhubarb is? If you go to the grocery store in the produce section, you might find some rhubarb. It's long like celery, but it's a reddish color. And sometimes people make pies with it. "Oh, Richie," I cooed as I stood next to the rhubarb bushes. "Do you like rhubarb?" "No," he said. "It's the sourest stuff on this planet." Now, I knew at long last that I had him. Bet I can eat more of this raw rhubarb than you can without getting the puckers, I challenged. I don't think so. I do. I don't, he said, narrowing his eyes. I do, I insisted. Don't, he hissed, looking smug. Do, I said furiously as I grabbed the first stalk and started chewing it almost down to the leaf. Have you ever tasted rhubarb? Might be fun to try. Who could eat more at your house? When I couldn't get one more sour bite into my mouth, he was still eating with relish. I thought you said you don't like rhubarb, I said through pursed lips. I don't like it. I love it, he announced as he popped the last stalk into his mouth. I was so mad I couldn't even feel how my belly was starting to ache. I can't stand you, Richard Barber. I double dog can't stand you, I screamed as I went into the house to be consoled by my grandmother. Yeah, and I'm 4 years older than you, too, you little twerp. Always have been and always will be, he called after me. Then he laughed, that rotten, red-headed older brother laugh. That night at dinner, I could hardly eat. Have you been eating angry apples again, child? Bubby asked as she sliced me a huge wedge of rhubarb pie. I baked your favorite. Richard gave me one of his extra rotten, weasel-eyed, greeny-toothed grins. At bedtime, my bubby came and sat on the edge of my bed like she did every night. Look, a falling star, she said. We watched it streak across the sky. Then she spit twice between her fingers and gave her chest a loud slap. Why did you do that, Bubby? I asked. I was making a wish. Didn't you know that wishes on falling stars come true? At last, I knew how I was going to get back at my brother. For the longest time, I watched the dark sky until I saw a star shoot across the night. Then I spit between my 2 fingers and slapped my chest. It was done. My wish was to do something, anything, better than my brother. I'd show him. The next morning, all I could think about was my wish. I was thinking about it so hard I almost didn't notice the wagons and trucks pulling into the field down the road near Four Corners. A traveling carnival, my brother shouted as he ran toward me. They're setting up right here in our field. Bet I can eat more hot dogs than you can, he teased. He was already starting it. This time, I was going to do something so incredible that even he would have to sit up and take notice. I had a star wish. I'd show my rotten, red-headed older brother all right. What do you suppose she's going to do that's better than what he can do? I wonder. That night, I ran straight for the merry-go-round. We must have taken 50 turns on that carousel. But then my brother got off. I stayed on. I went around and around and around. I knew I could do this longer than you, I shouted to my brother, feeling proud, but just a bit dizzy. Patricia, I heard my bubby call out. Get off from that thing. It's time to go home. The last thing I remembered was stepping off from the platform. Next thing I knew, I woke up with Bubby sitting on the edge of my bed. Mom and Grandpa were there too. Oh, you gave us all a fright, Mama said. How do you feel? What happened? I asked. You fell, my rotten red-headed older brother announced with the biggest grin on his face. I don't know what we would have done, my bubby said softly. Your brother carried you all the way home, and then he had to run to get Dr. Lee. You had to have stitches. I watched it all, he said excitedly. You fell off the merry-go-round right into some pop bottles, my Gramps added. Pop is like soda. You even passed out, my brother chirped. Looks like you finally did something special. It was from that exact moment that our relationship changed somehow. Thanks, Richie, I said to him. What's a big brother for anyway? He said, blushing. That night, we were all out in the yard. On hot Michigan nights, it was my family's custom to sleep outside where it was cool. Look at those stars, Bubby said quietly. Wishes are funny, aren't they? I said. Sometimes they come true differently than you think they will. That's why you have to be very careful what you wish for. It just may come true, Bubby said. Then she squeezed both of our hands. Hang on to the grass, she whispered. Why, Bub? My brother asked. Because if we don't, we might float up to the stars. Then she leaned over and kissed us both 3 times. I'll kiss your eyes, and I hold both of your hearts in my good keeping. And this night, I thank God that I walk this earth with both of you. Amen. Then we all just lay on our blankets in the gentle summer night. I'll always be 4 years older than you, though, my brother whispered softly. Then he smiled. All of us held one another's hands, and then we all drifted off to sleep. The end. So here are some pictures. I hope you enjoyed this story, boys and girls. Let's see. It turns out that the brother had 8 children of his own, and she ended up having 2 children. Here's a picture. You could tell that he's much older. Well, 4 years older, right? We said. There he is with her. And let's see if I can show you one more picture, maybe when they were younger. Here they are sitting on the porch. Can you see them? He doesn't look so rotten, does he? So what did she end up doing better than him? Or more times. That's right, she rode on the carousel or the merry-go-round for a longer time than he did. But the unfortunate thing that happened was, yeah, she fell. And what was the nice thing that he did? That's right, he went to go get the doctor. So he did turn out to be a nice brother after all. And he also, remember, he also did what? Not only did he get the doctor, but before he went to go get the doctor, he carried her home. So he really wasn't so rotten after all. Well, I hope you enjoyed the story, boys and girls, of my rotten red-headed older brother. And you know, those of you who have brothers and sisters, just remember some days when it's kind of hard to remember that if you really think about it, I bet your brother or your sister really has more, I bet they've done more kind things for you and have been nicer to you more times than not. So try and think of those good times and always try and be a good brother and sister to your sibling too. Okay? Well, boys and girls, story time with Ms. Garner is over. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.